there is one simple thing that everyone can do to help right now, and it will just take you a few seconds. And that is to go to change.org/end the clozapine REMs.
Now is an hour and a half of he won't leave the car. I leave the car, he gets out of the car. I try to get in the car, he gets in. My car doesn't lock very quickly, it's old. I walk away, he follows me. I'm really staying calm, but he is following me everywhere I go, shouting the same things over and over again. Finally, I say, I feel threatened, I'm gonna call the police. You can't fix someone who's determined to stay broken. And that is kind of my mantra these days.
This disease and the way it just changes your whole world, your whole life, it just is a shift that you can never return back from.
There is a whole range of emotions and events when someone you love has a serious mental illness, and there's always more advocacy that can help. Welcome to our podcast, Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches. From the place where schizophrenia and real life collide. East Coast, West Coast, Middle America. With Miriam Feldman, Mindy Greiling, and Randye K. Finally, a place to talk about the truth. So welcome to what is sort of an impromptu episode of Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches. We actually just decided yesterday to get together and talk about these important topics today, because we're all in a different place of the never-ending cycle of family emotions with serious mental illness. And let me tell you, podcast hosts are not immune from the vicious cycle. That cycle is crisis, coping, and advocacy. NAMI talks about that in Family to Family as the emotional stages of families of people with serious mental illness, when we are dealing with the progress or lack of it when someone we love has a serious mental illness. And unfortunately, like a game of chutes and ladders, you can be at advocacy and a crisis will happen again. We all know we cycle back and forth. I think the only difference is that the first time you're in crisis is you feel like you're walking through the woods with blindfolds on. At least when you go back to crisis, you kind of have an idea what to do. It still hurts. So Mindy is actually out advocating. She is meeting with a judge and legislator today. They're mental health champions. And she's meeting about civil commitment statute and how to get better services for the ones who, as she says, the sickest of the sick, who are so ill they slip through the cracks. And if you don't know who Mindy is, Mindy Greiling is our 3rd mom, and she wrote a book called Fix What You Can about her family's journey with her son's illness, but also what she was doing as a state legislator at the time to help all. So Mindy's out there tonight and couldn't join us, but we are thrilled to welcome back our mom number 3 for the night, Rachel Streiff, right? Is that how we say it?
Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
Phew, I guessed right. Okay. So Rachel joins us again. She was our guest on episode 37 called Advocating for the Best Available SMI Care. SMI stands for Serious Mental Illness. And we're going to chat, but she's also going to ask for our help, the help of our listeners in a specific piece of advocacy. And Rachel, I'll let you explain that in a moment, but it has to do with the angry moms, which you can see episode 67 about that. We're all fighting the good fight. So I'm Randye K. My book is Ben Behind His Voices. My co-host is Miriam Feldman, whose book is He Came In With It. We are all moms of sons with serious mental illness in various stages of recovery right now. And Rachel's son is also in a really good place right now. So welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight. So Rachel, why don't we start with you?
Sure.
What would you like us to know right now, and what can we do to help? Because
Yes.
there's always a place for advocacy, even in the middle of despair. It helps us feel better. So
Yes. And there is one simple thing that everyone can do to help right now, and it will just take you a few seconds. And that is to go to change.org /end the clozapine REMs. Sign that petition. There is a long report attached to that petition that you can read that has 89 sources cited at the very end. The Angry Moms has gotten together and compiled an extensive research report outlining all the reasons why the current clozapine risk evaluation and mitigation strategy has failed. It is creating hazards. It's leading to disability, incarceration, death for individuals with SMI, and it's got to go. And our advocacy efforts that started a couple years ago with Sue Maida, where we were titled The Angry Moms. We didn't pick that name. It just kind of took, right?
Took and stuck. So
it stuck, it took. So the culmination of that is that the FDA has heard us. We've been very visible. In fact, we've been publishing every week our famous negligence of the week emails. And that just got a story about us in Psychiatric News, the APA publication, about our patient advocacy efforts. So this movement started a couple years ago. We created a website and started bringing some serious visibility to problems with the clozapine alleged safety program that's causing more harm than it's helping. Imagine if you had diabetes and your life depended on insulin. And imagine if you only got insulin rationed to you in weekly quantities. And imagine that every week you had to go to a pharmacy and produce a lab report, a blood test that showed you still have diabetes to get a week's ration of insulin. That is exactly what is happening to individuals with treatment-resistant schizophrenia or that have strong recurrent suicidal risks, which is the second forgotten indication for clozapine. So this added layer of FDA bureaucracy, surveillance, this patient monitoring program has held families hostage for 35 years. And it's just not appropriate. There are several other medications with higher hematological risks that are more, quote, dangerous than clozapine. None of them have this rigid monitoring requirement as a condition to receive your life-saving medication. It's profound discrimination. So when I got to tell you a story, because this is just one of the stories, thousands of stories coming in. I'm a legal guardian for a woman, and she was in her 11th month of clozapine. The risk of developing neutropenia, severe neutropenia, was next to nothing. And she ended up having to be admitted to the hospital for a psychiatric situation. They stopped her clozapine. As a result of that, and they just stopped her clozapine because they didn't carry it in the pharmacy, and they have a policy to retest anybody who needs clozapine before they give it to them. As a result of that interruption, she got very ill, and she lost the ability to consent to a blood test. Okay. So she refused the blood test, and I, as her guardian, I created a legal document. I signed it. I requested, please, we, with full knowledge of the risks, absolve this hospital of any liability with fully informed consent. Please just give her her medicine. It's the only one that works for her. Sign my life away. We don't want the blood test. Just give her the medicine. They wouldn't do it. You know what they told me? They said, we can't do that, but if you as her guardian would like to order a forced blood test under restraints, we can do that. That's when I realized that true hostage taking at the hands of the FDA's REMs program is what's happening. So please
Rachel,
sign this petition.
can you explain for our listeners, like real bare bones, what the REMS is and why it's not appropriate in this case? Because I don't think everybody knows that.
Not everybody knows, right?
The Angry Moms episode has a lot more details, but yes, I think it's important.
Yeah, let me give you a quick rundown. Good. Clozapine had a bit of a tumultuous history. When it was in the process of clinical trials, there was a cluster of deaths for severe neutropenia in Finland. 8 people died. The development on that drug was halted for many years. Eventually, it was brought back. It was finally approved for treatment-resistant schizophrenia. It outperformed all other antipsychotics in 1989 with a requirement that individuals had to have a weekly blood test to check their neutrophil count every week. Over time, that blood test went from weekly forever to bi-weekly after 6 months, monthly after 1 year, but still a profound barrier to being able to access clozapine. At the time that blood test was instituted, it was meant to be temporary until we had enough aftermarket information to find out more about this risk. Unfortunately, the patent ran out, and we know what that means. It took so long to get clozapine to market. There wasn't much time left on the patent. There's no money in it. Clozapine lost its champion, and no one, not a manufacturer, not any of these pharmaceutical companies, or even the FDA, or even, I'll say it, the APA, no one bothered to revisit this cumbersome program for 30 years. And what we know now is that neutropenia, it occurs in only 1 in 250 clozapine patients. It's rarely fatal. The fatalities associated with clozapine are only between 2 and 5 in 10,000 clozapine patients. It is, in fact, the lowest cause of death among individuals taking clozapine that die. And we've known this since 1997, that clozapine-induced neutropenia is effectively a nothing burger. Yet we're still held hostage by not only this rigorous blood testing, but in 2015, the FDA put this added bureaucratic barrier that allows pharmacies to block a refill. And what's happening is that only individuals that don't have clozapine-induced neutropenia are having their refills blocked. No one is finding out they have this rare side effect by pulling up to a pharmacy window and having their prescription blocked.
So I understand that. And by the way, if you have heard us talk a lot about clozapine on this podcast. Yeah. It is not the only med. Different meds work for different people, but many people have found for their loved ones, it's the best one. And my son was in that category for quite some time, no longer is, and the REMS is part of that. But what we're not doctors. We're just fighting for the best possible treatments for our loved ones. There is a brand new medication that came out this week. It's all over the news. 10 people have sent me, hey, did you see this? Yes, we see it. And it's exciting to have a new treatment. It's absolutely exciting. As we mentioned on the podcast, they did not compare the efficacy of this new medication to clozaril. So if clozaril is the only thing that has been working for your loved one, it probably is best to stay with it. However, we are thrilled whenever any new research comes out and something is approved for somebody to try. But we also want clozaril to be available for the people who are doing so well on it. And many of the success stories that we have shared on this podcast, not all of them, but many of them are people who have found insight into their illness and reduction of both positive symptoms added to their personalities, and negative symptoms, things taken away from their personalities. clozaril seems to work best for both of those categories. When my son was on it, he got off disability and was working full time and driving around town like a regular person. And now it's very different, as you'll hear. But so sign the petition. And also, on this website, is there sort of a template letter, or if people want to write to the FDA? I understand you want letters written as well.
Yes, and we'll get more information out on this through our website, theangrymoms.com, and I believe some other groups like the Treatment Advocacy Center are going to be distributing information on how you can send a few comments to the FDA in advance of this public hearing. There is an open docket for public comment that you can find online and send in your comments. Right. The petition is the culmination of the Angry Moms experience. And we have even gone so far as to propose a new product label with redlined edits to the clozapine label, which haven't changed significantly in 35 years and still reflect original parameters that were based on white male subjects that were the primary demographic enrolled in the clinical trials. We're really trying to make change based on our experience. So anyone that signs that petition, your name is going to go on our recommendation, and we've got to change this. Thousands of people, between 2,000 and 8,000 people, are dying every year from lack of access to clozapine. Okay. So it's absolutely tragic that we're dealing with this.
You've heard how you can help. And Rachel, I hope you'll stick around because you're a mom too.
Yep, I'm here.
Yeah. And, you know, I know that although your son is doing really well right now, I know there have been ups and downs in the journey, I'm sure, on the way to success, and as there always are. And so thank you so much first thing I do when we close the podcast is I will go sign that petition and be very happy to do so. So,
and can I just say, it's a kind of thing that is important to our listeners because everybody is dealing with these issues, but also put it on your own Facebook page and ask your friends to just do it. It really literally takes seconds. It's not, you just like click a button and you've done it. Put it on your personal Facebook. Ask your friends to do it. We need to get as much help as we can, not just people who are dealing with this. It's something that can be helped by everybody.
And we've had actually really good support from pharmacists. Pharmacists they hate the REMs. It's just as painful for them to not be able to dispense a medication to someone who needs it. Pharmacists have been signing, doctors have been signing, clinics, group homes that have to navigate this horrible system just to get the medications for their clients. We're getting a lot of support from everybody.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. It's very important and very timely. We want to do it now this week, and I will get this podcast out ASAP. So this is yet another example of the obstacles that people with serious mental illness face, and also what their families face. So Mimi's just come back from a lovely vacation, retreat, traveling. She's always traveling, but we shared a little phone call about the trials and tribulations of where we are right now. Mimi, what's going on with you and Nick?
Well, things are okay. Things have been pretty steady for a while. Honestly, he's never gotten back to where he was before he got the pneumonia a couple years ago. It's really tragic that happened. But he's good and he's steady, and we'll hear about your situation, Randye, but I've talked to a few people about it, and just anecdotally about how there's always another shoe to drop. There's never any sense of, okay, this is it now and it will be okay. It can reverse itself, which is back to what Rachel's talking about, because that's what's happening is people who are stable and good on clozapine are derailed by this. And it's not like you just get back on it. It's a hard thing. It's a slow titration. When people are functioning well and responding well to it, and then it's taken away, there's no guarantee they're ever going to be as good as they were again. But as far as Nick, he's okay. He's well. I was telling Randye a little anecdote the other day about we were talking about the problems with teeth and with getting them to the dentist and to brush your teeth and to take care of the teeth and showering. And I had a thing with Nick the other day where he won't shower. And I told him he had to shower if he wanted to go do this thing he was going to do with me. And I got there and he hadn't showered. And so I left and we didn't do it. And I said, we'll try again tomorrow. And that night, he called me up and FaceTimed me, and he was standing in his bathroom, and he had water on him, and he didn't have his shirt on, and his hair looked wet. And he says, "Here, I want to prove to you, I took a shower. I'm wet. I took a shower." And I thought, great, this is great. Not only is he FaceTiming and figuring all that out, but he's doing it. And then I got there the next morning, and I can tell in his bathroom when he's taken a shower. There's, it's very clear when he has and when he hasn't. And I got there and I looked and he hadn't taken a shower. And I had to leave again. And I thought to myself, he's putting more time, effort, and ingenuity into faking taking a shower than it would take to take a damn shower. And who would have thought 39, he's going to be 39 on Sunday. 39 years ago that I would have thought that this would be what I'm doing with my adult son, policing him taking a shower. And even this is something we can laugh about. It's not even tragic or dangerous, but it's just this disease and the way it just changes your whole world, your whole life. It just is a shift that you can never return back from. And that's just like a little thing that isn't even that bad of a thing. But Randye, tell us what's going on with you.
Yeah, I mean, but we end up like, I have 3 beautiful, wonderful young grandchildren, and we're all studying how to get them to do what we want them to do. It's like, as soon as you do this, then I'll do that. And we teach that in family to family. Instead of, we can't go because you haven't taken a shower, you say, as soon as you take a shower, I'll be happy to do this thing. Oh, we'll try again tomorrow. This is exactly the language and tone we're using with the 6-year-old in our life when, so it's just like, whoever thought we'd be there when our sons are grown? And it's always like, this is new behavior coming back, old behavior returning, basically. And so it always strikes me how clever, how smart, how the lengths that they will go to try to fool us, even though it seldom works. But
I know this isn't politically correct, but Craig always says, he just shakes his head at Nick and he goes, crazy like a fox. And it's like, it's true. I mean, the brain is working. It's just
channeled for the wrong.
Yeah.
All right. So, wow. So if you have never listened to the podcast before, first of all, welcome. Obviously, we're 3 moms. We're 4 with Rachel tonight, and there are many more of us. That Mindy and Mimi and I generally host this podcast, and we're moms with grown children with schizophrenia. And so my son, who I call Ben for public purposes, it's not his real name, and actually not using his real name actually helps me to cry a little bit less when I talk about him. So he was in my book, Ben Behind His Voices. At the end of that book, he's living in a group home and just starting clozaril and starting to go back to college, but I didn't think he'd ever work again. After several years on the clozaril, he started to do so well that they got him his own apartment, and he crashed because not really meant to live alone, at least not. And also no med supervision. So he crashed again. Then he lived with us for 9 years, and we kept him on the clozaril every day. We became the caregivers, policemen, and everything else. But every time my son took his meds at night, I would say, bought myself another 24 hours of my son being healthy. And with that coercion, there's really no other word. It was a house rule. You may or may not know, legally, we have no right to force meds on our sons, but we have a right to our family rules and our boundaries, and that's what we stick with. For 9 years, he succeeded because he was on this medication. And when COVID came and pot came back into the picture, full disclosure, lost his job, lost his purpose, his structure, his community, and then stopped taking his meds. And he was hospitalized again during COVID for almost 6 months, back into a group home where he did really well for a while, but at this point refused to be on clozaril, and he was on a monthly injection of Haldol, which has worked better than expected for him. There are days when he's kind of like his healthy self. Unfortunately, as we learned on our episode about teeth, these meds, I think particularly Haldol, he says his mouth is always dry. The pH balance of his mouth is completely off. His entire top row of teeth have to be removed. There's no way he can ever not be in pain. Something we were hoping to have done last week. But after trials and tribulations and going back to addiction to pot, he got himself arrested a year ago. And I've spent a year working hard to believe his version of the story, which is that he didn't do it, and also to get letters of recommendation so he could be put into a jail diversion program, which would give strict supervision. And upon graduating from the program, he's never been convicted, but his charges would be wiped clean. Took a long time to get the bed. So, arrest to release was about 14 months. But the months he was in jail diversion, oh my God. Like my husband kept saying, I like Sober Ben. Sober Ben, I remember Sober Ben. I mean, it wasn't just that he likes the injection because it's only once every 4 weeks. He doesn't feel as bound by it. He complains of the side effects of clozaril of being tired. So I don't think it was administered properly. We did not know about Dr. Laitman at the time. See the episode with Dr. Laitman. But he was doing okay. He earned passes. He didn't touch pot. He was drug tested every day. He gets released, but the charges weren't dropped because the paperwork wasn't in on time. And I found him an apartment to live in the same town where the jail diversion program was, in a housing situation where he would have a case manager, but it was on his apartment. He had freedom and the choice to join a clubhouse and be involved in this community. There was a week in between when he was released and his apartment would be ready. And since we love Sober Ben, he was allowed to live with us. We had 2 fantastic days. He even took a walk with his sister and admitted to her and then to me that he thought he might actually have this thing called schizophrenia. That was the first I had ever heard him say it. He said, I did a lot of time thinking about my life. And of course, I'm living in hope. As I've said, and I never regret hoping, because hope is a wonderful feeling. And anybody living with serious mental illness in their life knows that the other shoe can drop at any time. So we learn to appreciate the good days. Any days we make good memories, we get to put it in that attic where we store the good memories. And I'm very grateful for the years we got back. But by the 3rd day out, something switched. He was ornery and argumentative. And I think I mentioned this on the podcast. I use the F word, which I never use, more times in one night, trying to knock some sense into him, which I also know doesn't work.
Not like you and me, Rachel, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I just finished reading a lovely book, Remarkably Bright Creatures, and one of the characters is dealing with a drug-addicted mother. And he says at one point to someone, you can't fix someone who's determined to stay broken. And that is kind of my mantra these days. The week that my son lived with us, I just knew he was using again because it was just very difficult. Staying out all night, sleeping all day, not nice to the family. It was like a completely different person until I was like, get you in your apartment. So it's not going well. Last week, he's lying. He's asking for, there was some money set aside while he was incarcerated pre-trial that I'm saving for his teeth work, which is thousands of dollars, and also for, hey, you know, if this works and you want to go, he was talking about going back to college and he wanted money for tuition. I said, well, we're lucky for you. You might even be able to buy an old used car with this money. And he says, I've learned I'm going to budget. I'm not going to. So he had good intentions, but last week I was getting texts all day. Oh, I need some of that mad money because I'm going to a concert. I need some of that mad money because I found a pair of sneakers I need to buy. I need some of this. I'm going clubbing with friends. And, you know, the mom in me is like, oh, he has a social life. But I knew it wasn't true. I just caved. I said, here, the money for the teeth is sacrosanct, but I really don't want him to have a car if he can't drive anyway. So I was kind of like, here, just know this is the last of the money. There's no more. He spent $4,000 in 4 weeks. Now, I don't know how much clubbing you can do,
yeah,
but that's not going for clubbing. And the lies that they weave, like they're 14 years old and at the height of rebellion, you know, we're going to a concert. We're going to see Rancid. So I go on that, said, Rancid's in LA. You live in Connecticut. Oh, I don't mean Rancid. I mean, they're in Hartford. I look it up. No, they're not. They're in, yeah, that's the one we're going to. Like I knew, I just couldn't hold the boundaries because he hounded me and finally I'm like, here, take your car money because I don't want you to have a car. But when it came to the teeth money, I was strict. And that's what's left, enough money to fix his teeth. And P.S., because he worked and his Social Security disability is above $800 and something, he cannot get Medicaid unless he pays $13,000 a year deductible. So anything visiting nurse is out of pocket. And so, you know, having the teeth fixed would have freed us up for a few months to have free visiting nurse. Like you juggle. I'm sure any family member who's also conservator knows we're juggling all these things. The last lie was, I got my injection tonight, something he's never, like, he's always been truthful about. And I'm like, well, where'd you go? I'm looking on my chart to see, you know, where he is, you know, there's no sign. I go to the hospitals. There's no sign. I show them my conservator papers. He wasn't here. So it's like the shower and the wet hair. He's like, well, my friend took me. I knew I had to get it. Just look at my arm for proof. My friend told me, and I don't remember what city we were in, and I don't remember the name of the walk-in. And I mean, it's just like they weave these ridiculous.
And you feel so stupid.
So stupid.
But you want to believe so hard.
Yeah.
You know, you just want it to be the good thing, and it never is, and you know better. But and then it's such a cycle, you know, it's almost like an addiction cycle of us, you know.
Well, yeah. And then, you know, I always felt like with the injection, we got a pretty good window of pretty decent behavior, but the few days before the injection was always a little iffy. But and then you add drugs, whatever he's using, he's not, you know, I don't know I don't know what he's using. I don't know what's happening here. I don't know where the $4,000 went to. And he's afraid of needles. So I can't imagine it's anything he's shooting just because of his fear. But there's a lot of ways to get high and you know. So anyway, he told me he had the injection. I followed up. I looked everywhere. No. finally, 3 days later, I'm like, you did not have this done. Yes, I did. And, I just can't remember the name of the place. And I just said, look, I'm not giving you your allotted budgeted money tomorrow unless I see proof. He goes, well, if I had the shot twice in 1 week, it could kill me. I said, well, go to the hospital and ask them to take a blood test. Anyway, it took withholding the money for him to go to the hospital and then admit to me he'd been lying about having the injection. And he goes to the hospital calls me. Again, if you have conservatorship, you have the right to this information. And finally the nurse goes, yep, he's here, we're all set. And so I transfer the money he was asking for, the last of the mad money. And she calls me back later. She goes, oh, by all set, I meant the injection was ready. I didn't mean it was in his arm. And he had eloped from the emergency room. He had run away before the injection, went and got his money. And then I'm calling him and he's like, well, I'm an hour away from the hospital. I said, you just left 5 minutes ago. I feel like, it's like when the teenager said, well, those are my friend's cigarettes in my purse. It was just like such a nightmare. It's like scenes in my book, which came out over 10 years ago, of his rocky adolescence. And at that moment, I just hated him. And I know I hate his illness and I hate his addiction. But at that moment, it felt bigger than that. Finally, I force him to go back to the hospital. He has to send me a picture of himself in the waiting room. And so it took 2 emergency room visits to get the injection. And I could see it immediately on my chart that he'd had it. Then yesterday happened. So it's touch and go. And constantly he's begging me. Oh, so we went to get his teeth pulled and he ran from that as well. So I picked him up and he was scared. And the scene in the dentist's office was, I lost it again. I screamed at my son. And mind you, I am a noted radio personality in Connecticut. So if anybody listens to me on the radio, I'm cool and calm and collected. And I'm on an NPR affiliated station, and she's like, Randye K was screaming at her son in the dentist's office. But I think the dentist was about to scream at him because he was like a broken record, on and on. But you can pull my teeth, but you can't cut my gums. You can pull my teeth, but you can't. I'm sorry. I mean, it was just over and over. It almost like mania. Anyway, he didn't get it done. And I was really angry because everything was riding on that. And our relationship, and I said, I have to stay away from you for a few days. Next thing I know, the only text.
Understand the level of disappointment, that we go through with this, because I went through the whole teeth thing with Nick too and had him leave a bunch of times. And I mean, you get to the point where you put all these pieces, these complicated, shaky pieces in place, and it's gonna happen. And you're so happy and you're so hopeful, and then it falls apart. And the level of disappointment to a mother, I think it's like it's to the marrow of your bones. I don't think anybody really understands how bad that is when you get so close to fixing one thing, like Mindy's book, Fix What You Can. Like, okay, this one thing's going to happen. Everything else, whatever. But today, this one thing's going to happen, and then it falls apart, and it's a despondent, helpless feeling that it's just hard to imagine. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. And I don't want to leave out the dads out there, the siblings, the spouses, because that disappointment is completely, I mean, my daughter is devastated. She had her brother back for 2 days and he bought birthday presents for the kids, and it was like having it, but they took a long walk together. To see my 2 kids take a long walk together was like miraculous. And in my frontal cortex, I store that in my lovely memories, but in my amygdala, I just want to. Yeah, Rachel, you look like you have something to add to this. Have you felt this?
No, but I can relate, and I also have a pretty big local group here in Arizona where I'm at, and we call ourselves Arizona Mad Moms, and we have a weekly Zoom, and the stories they're the same. It's the same struggle. And you're right. It's moms, we have dads, we have sisters, we have an uncle that's taking care of a niece. I mean,
I heard from two men this week, either, they write to one of us. This one wrote to me because our contact information is right there on the show notes. You can always write to us, or there's a way to write to us through our website. But as I say, you need to put your contact information in there because we can't respond from there. But I heard from, this man, what he's going through. I heard from someone who lives in Haiti, whose son is in America. I mean, and she thinks we should have a class action lawsuit against the government because, they worked for the pharma. I mean, fabulous ideas. And I heard from this mom who had to make the decision because her son was in sepsis from being homeless to have his feet amputated. And he ended up kicking the nurse with his stump and was put in jail. I mean, the things that families go through, my story is by far not the worst, but I will fill you in on yesterday.
Tell us about that.
So after the incident with the teeth, I texted my son and said, I think it's best if we don't talk to each other for a while. I will send you your daily money, but I need to stay away from you because it's not good for us to be together right now. That was 3 days of peace. And then I get a phone call. My cell phone was stolen. And now he doesn't have a cell phone. I don't know. Did he sell it? Did he give it to someone? I mean, he says it was stolen. Did you fill out a police report? No. This is where the mysteries all began. So now every time he's texting me, it's from a phone. He's borrowed from someone. I can't get in touch with him. And he does have a case manager who is doing her best to be on the case. Like, she's like, how can I help you? I will drive him to medical appointments. I will take him food shopping. And I'm like, yes, please, but it's just like, he's new there. He doesn't, he's not entrenched in the community. So yesterday, my husband and I talked about it, and we don't know if we believe his story, but also he has we bought him a new cell phone while he was in jail. The old cell phone was supposed to be here, but he took it with him to the apartment. So I said, well, here's the deal. I will come to your apartment and help you look for the old cell phone. And then if I don't find it, then we will see about getting you a burner phone or something like that. He wouldn't let me in his apartment. So this is also not good. And so we finally decided we could get a prepaid 2-month cell phone. And I agreed via these friends' phones to meet my son at T-Mobile and set up the new phone with a new number. I show up early, but he has been and gone already. I finally pick him up at his apartment, and he is clearly in a not a good state of mind. The only things out of his mouth were, I need my money. It's my money. You're my conservator. You have no right to hold the money from me. I agreed to have you be conservator so you could get me out of scrapes, but you have no right to decide how I spend my money. I want the money for my teeth. I don't want my teeth pulled. You have no right to do this. Over and over and over again. I'm driving him. I said, I'm not going to give you any more of that money. You get your daily money, figure it out. I will buy you a Stop and Shop gift card so you can get food, because he's saying, I'm starving. Every excuse under the sun. He's in my car, and the tirade keeps coming. It just keeps coming. I get out of the car. He follows me. He wants a pack of cigarettes. I say, I won't go in that store unless you're quiet in there. So he's quiet in the store for maybe 30 seconds. I buy him the cigarettes with his money, not mine. And I'm in this outdoor shopping center mall, retreating from my son with him following behind me 4 steps, screaming that I'm a terrible mother. Am I too stupid to understand this logical thing he's telling me over and over? Finally, I can't food shop with him. I just buy them the gift card. We get back in the car. We go back to his apartment. Now is an hour and a half of he won't leave the car. I leave the car. He gets out of the car. I try to get in the car. He gets in. And my car doesn't lock very quickly. It's old. I run away. I walk away. He follows me. I'm staying calm. I'm really because my husband said he's worried about me. I'm really staying calm, but he is following me everywhere I go, shouting the same things over and over again. Finally, I say, I feel threatened. I'm going to call the police. And meanwhile, one of the people whose phone he has been borrowing has come over and is witnessing all this. And he's claiming Ben owes him $30, and Ben's claiming, I don't owe him $30. So, he's deep into something. What he wants is $100 to go clubbing tonight. I said, you just spent $1,000 in the last week. What did you spend it on? I'm trying. I know you can't reason with mental illness, but, basically, I just tried to get away from him, and I literally could not. So finally, I managed to get in the car and lock it before he gets in the passenger seat. This is after 10 times. It's a narrow driveway where he lives, and he stands right in front of the car, of course. And I can't move. So this witness guy, says, yeah, hey, come here, man, I want to talk to you. So Ben is away from the front of the car, and I start driving away. Now it's a driveway. I can't drive fast. Ben runs alongside the car. You can't leave. You can't leave. I want my money. I want my money. He pulls open the driver's side door and tries to get in or grab the wheel. And I feel like I'm in an action film. I'm like, I can't. I have to keep going. I just have to keep driving. And he falls to the ground in shock, and he starts like screaming. And I just keep driving because I don't have a choice. He's okay because he got up to run after the car at full speed. So I know I haven't broken my child's bones. I drive far enough away that he can't catch up to me, and I pull over, and I get a text from the witness who says, my son has called the police on me and reported my license plate that I've assaulted him. And I call the police immediately and tell them what happened. And they say, well, ma'am, you have to return to the scene and we'll take statements from both of you. So now I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to be arrested now. I'm going to be arrested. This is the child who not 2 weeks before was like, I'm so happy to be out. I've learned my like any mother, mental illness aside, any relative of any addict will go through the same thing. It's not, his schizophrenia-ish is under control, but stress will exacerbate it even with treatment, no matter what they're on. So about an hour later, the police have taken my statement and his statement and determined that he is guilty of breach of peace and interfering with a 911 call because he had ripped the phone out of my hand when I was going to call the police. And they're minor charges. And
does that affect his parole sort of
stuff? I don't know. He's not really on parole because he was never convicted. And this is a different geographical area. I'm learning all the police lingo. The officer couldn't have been nicer. Listen, I knew what to do. When I called 911, I specified, and it didn't say the word threaten. And if any of you are ever going to go through this, make sure you get the crisis file from NAMI or other sources that will tell you what to do in a crisis. I told them to bring a crisis team, to not brandish any guns, that he was having a mental health crisis. And they said, and they did that. Actually, they brought a social worker in training. And I said to her when we left, I said, are you sure you want to do this work? She says, yes, I like to help people. So like, God bless you, social workers. Thank you. So the officer couldn't have been nicer. They did arrest him, and they had to bring him down for processing. But he texted me later to say they released him on a promise to appear. And he is not to contact me in any way, shape, or form. Of course, I wake up this morning to a text after midnight. It's after 12. Can I have my daily money? And he does not, he's stubborn. He doesn't give up. I take a screenshot and I delete it. And now, so my husband and I toasted to the fact that I didn't get arrested. So, but now today, what I've been to the bank to uncover a few lies. There were many other lies, about the phone was stolen, and he thinks somebody used the phone and made a liquor purchase while he was sleeping, and he called the bank to reverse it. But I went to the bank. Like, I feel like a sleuth today. I'm just sleuthing to see what happens. He's not allowed to contact me. God bless the court here. The domestic abuse advocate, we don't live together, so it's not technically domestic abuse. She called me to see if I was okay and did I want a protective order. And so for the first time in my life, I have a protective order against my son. It's not a restraining order, but the level I chose was he's not allowed to abuse me, and he's also not allowed near my home. I can lift it when I feel comfortable, but this gives me the right. And I hope if any, any listener in crisis, just take this information, and I hope you never need it. If he shows up near my home, I can call the police and say I have a protective order. So that gives, so I haven't heard from him, but I can track what ATMs he's taking money out of, and I know his email. And so he has now something he vowed he'd never do again. He's obviously signed up for these places that will lend you money against your Social Security check. And he has actually deposited money in the account. And so he's planning something, and I don't know what it is. I don't believe he showed up to court this morning. I was not informed, and I couldn't get an answer. And the social worker where he's living was supposed to visit him this afternoon, and I haven't heard from her either. So I'm kind of in limbo. I'm kind of in shock. And
Randye, does he qualify for a hospitalization under criteria where you live?
That's a very good question. And I did say to the officer, what I want is for him to be hospitalized. And he said he doesn't meet the criteria. And when
is that up to police officers in you live?
Well, there was a social worker there. He didn't make that decision. He said, in my experience, I don't think they will hospitalize him for this. But when I spoke to the advocate this morning, I said, you mean running alongside my car and trying to jump in on my lap is not endangering himself or me? How does that not qualify for a 72-hour hold and a detox and a drug test?
Right.
So anyway, that's where we go. And we've spoken a lot on this podcast about finding joy anyway, and I found a lot of joy today. And I find purpose in advocacy, as we all do. And this podcast is advocacy. It's our way to reach people, and we're so grateful to hear from you if it's helpful to you. And yeah, I did my work. I hugged my grandkids. I sang Bushel and a Peck, and you find your moments of joy, because I will not let this heartbreak ruin the other aspects of my life. I've become an expert in compartmentalization. But every time when I went onto his email and saw that he'd done this thing he vowed he'd never do again. So I don't know where he is. I don't know what he's planning. I don't know what he's doing, but I've done everything I can. And
then the other thing is everything you're going through, and then underlying all of that, you're worrying about him too.
Yeah, well, yeah. If I went to my old photograph albums right now and looked at pictures of him when he was well, I would cry so many tears. I just can't do that right now. I have to kind of put the blinders on and live in the moment. And, I said on the podcast a few weeks ago when he was about to be released that I was daring to hope, and I don't regret that. But I'm also, and this one thing I also want, when drug addiction, whatever it is, combines with serious mental illness, and as it so often does, it's a double tragedy. And it's a double awareness they have to come up with, not only insight into schizophrenia, but the piece that addicts need to come to where they hit bottom and realize drugs are a problem. My son was arrested because he was smoking pot 4 and 5 times a day and begging for money to make that happen and abusing money to make that happen. And even after a year incarcerated, he said, I don't think I have a problem with pot.
Yeah.
I can smoke it once in a while for fun. So, that is, so there is Al-Anon, and you have to find a meeting that works for you. But I went to one last week, and you always hear one thing that really hits you. And that was a reading from the book about, there's parts of it I have to reformulate in my mind. The God piece is a little not the way I believe, but I believe in something besides us, but the wording I have to interpret in my head. pretty much all organized religion. But anyway, he has a higher power, I hope. There's a higher power for all of us. That's where part of my hope comes from. But what I did love was a reading that talked about a person whose husband was an alcoholic, and enabling was when he fell out of bed every night drunk, putting him back into bed. Detachment was shrugging your shoulders and climbing over him and getting to bed himself. And the people at her meeting said, take one more step to loving detachment, which is putting a blanket over him so he's not cold when he's asleep, and then climbing over him and getting into bed. And that's where I want to be with my son. I mean, I will always love him. I will always love him. And I've supported him and will support him through incarceration, hospitalization, all those things, but I will not support him through addiction. I won't enable him through addiction. And that's really painful.
These are painful things that we have to parse, because when it's dual diagnosis, when it's addiction and SMI, they're contradictory protocols for them. Because with SMI, they tell us there's no such thing as rock bottom. You don't wait for rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And with addiction, it's all about the rock bottom. So when they have both those things, you're put in such an impossible position. How do you reconcile those two things?
I don't know. And, we have an episode with Stephanie Marquette.
Oh, right. That was a great episode.
Stephanie, whose last name I will put in the
show
notes.
Something like that.
Yeah, she was featured in the New York Times, and this is her thing, like combine the things together. And I'll just end with this. First of all, thank you both for listening so intently and allowing me. I think it's important. Some of our listeners think we're out of the woods. You're never out of the woods. So, some of us are deeper in the woods than others, and it changes. The view changes all the time. And support is important, but I think the thing that breaks my heart the most, and always has, was when he really thought moving into this new apartment was going to be a fresh start. He was excited. We got him furniture, and he went to job interviews with, I think I'm going to get this job. I think I'm going to, with his rotten teeth and his dirty clothes and his record that isn't expunged yet. And he had such hope. He had a list of places. I brought him to 3 job interviews, and he really thought he was going to be called back. And he said, yeah, Mom, as soon as my teeth are fixed and my record, I know I'm going to get a job. And maybe he will. But now when drug addiction enters, even that piece where he's like, I don't like it, but the dentures is going to, that's missing. But he had such hope. I wasn't the only one with hope. He had it too. Mm-hmm. And being turned down for work can break him, at least temporarily. So, and, even now, anyway, that's where we are. And thank God for the support of friends and the love of family and, little children in my life. And, thank God for the social workers who want to do this work. Thank you for helping to take care of this. Thank God. Thank you to the police officers who went through crisis training, because this could have been so much worse. And thank you for the advocacy you're doing, Rachel. And, we're all doing. We're all just trying to work together to make this better. And yeah, so a truth-telling gab fest of 3 moms. Any last words? Because I
just want to replug my Angry Moms petition. It's change.org/end the clozapine REMs.
REMs is REMS.
Yep.
Thank you. And you can also go to theangrymoms.com, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And Randye, we're so sorry. I mean, there's really nothing else to say but that to you. And as far as our listeners, this is just an indication that we're all in this, we're all have these ups and downs. Nothing is guaranteed, and we go through it too, and we need to support each other too, and we need to vent too. And that's why we're doing this. Where at least there's a place. We can't solve the problem sometimes, but at least there's a place for us. Because 20-something years ago, when this all started with Nick, there was nowhere. I was on an island.
Yeah.
Well, at least we have each other.
Yes, we do. So you know, I can't tell you how many times we hear from a listener that says, thank you, I don't feel so alone anymore. And we try to provide information as well. But so I guess my final message to me, to you both, and to all the listeners is you are not alone. And there's validation for everything you're feeling, and there is hope. I still believe there is hope and there is help. And one of the best ways when you're ready to deal with your pain is to turn it into advocacy, however you do that. I am going to, once this crisis has gone wherever it's going to, really double down on making sure assisted outpatient treatment is considered legislatively in Connecticut. We're one of the only 2 states that don't have it. Here's the thing. When my son was court required to stay sober, he stayed sober without an argument. If there were a court order that he had to stay sober and be drug tested or go back to jail now, he would do it. And so that's why people die with their rights on.
Yep.
And for some people, structure is the most comforting thing. And thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And we have a lot of other great episodes coming up on housing. Another episode with Dr. Laitman. We're also working on one about the keto diet. And stay with us. We're Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches. Thank you. Hey, thanks for joining us for this episode of Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches with Randye K., Mindy Greiling, and Miriam Feldman. To get in touch with us or to learn more about our books, please visit our websites at miriam-feldman.com, mindygreiling.com, or randyk.com.